7 kids. Yes, I have one daughter. How about you? How many babies, Daddy, does she have? If you don't mind me asking. Ellipses. Maybe I'll paint later. Hello? FaceTime video, Grandpa Josh. Hi, baby.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. What are you doing?
For a while.
Huh?
You slept for a while.
Yeah, I took a long nap. I didn't sleep very good last night.
know. Just had a little bit of a time.
So, yeah, swimming was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I did diving. Well, actually,
Did Daddy get videos for Mommy?
well, what I dang it. What? Well, what I did, Dad, what I did is I put my goggles on and I did this. I was crouching over the edge and I just dropped my head and did it basically that. So basically, so yeah, um, yeah, it was a lot of swimming. I wish you were there.
Oh man, I wish I was there too.
So we won't be able to go there until next year after Thursday.
It's the summertime closing up.
They close August 30th.
Yeah.
Summer break ends in 3 days. In 3 days. They only have it for summer break.
And a few days later, when she reached in the bag, she found the money was damp and it was getting moldy. So she asked Charlie, why is the money wet? And Charlie said Donna physically washed the money. From the time of the murder to the bump, she admits she got money from Charlie, she got money for her car, and before that, he helped her with Mazda repairs. Katie started getting paychecks in September of 2014, and she got her last one in May of 2016. Charlie would hand them to her, and he would give her multiple paychecks at a time. Those stopped after Sigfredo got arrested because the Adelsons got spooked. She said Donna signed all 44 checks that she received. And when Charlie would hand her the checks, he would tell her, don't deposit it all at once, just space them out. But Katie said she did not always follow his instructions. Charlie reached out to Katie after the bump and they met up. They were in Charlie's car and he turned up the volume and told Katie that Donna got approached. Now, once they were inside the Dolce Vita restaurant, he talked more. And she had no idea that law enforcement was intercepting these conversations. She said she thought maybe Charlie thought she was setting him up, and he was going through a lot of scenarios. He mentioned that Rivera's nickname, Tato, was on a piece of paper. He was looking at that and then talking to her about that paper. She was worried that Charlie knew the nickname Tato. She said Sigfredo's nickname was Tudo. When Charlie tells her this, she thought it could be coming from Rivera. She wasn't giving Charlie all the information she had about this and was going to handle it on her own. And Charlie did ask her to contact that phone number on the paper to figure out what was going on. He said he didn't know if it was the FBI or someone who had information on what had happened. And Charlie would say this is one of two scenarios. Katie has reviewed the transcript from the Dolce Vita restaurant, and she says it is accurate. She obviously knew Rivera, but Sigfredo did not tell her that he took Rivera with him to kill Dan. And she didn't tell Charlie Sigfredo was doing the job. Charlie never told her this murder is going to benefit my mother or this murder is going to benefit my sister. But the prosecution asks, did you know that? And Katie says yes. She also confirms Charlie did tell her his mother was at the house right before she arrived the night of the murder and that Donna washed the money. She admits on the wiretaps they spoke in code. For example, property and tenants were code for looking to who was behind the bump. Katie says Charlie would go on these little rants and she would go along with him, but she knew they were speaking in code in case the phones were tapped. The last thing the prosecutor says, innocent people don't speak in code, do they? She says no further questions. So on cross, when you started your testimony, you were asked about previously lying under oath, and from the first trial with Sigfredo to your trial, you gave proffers. Katie said she didn't give a proffer until after her trial, but before Charlie's. She met with prosecutors at the state attorney's office, and the defense asked if each time they met she gave more information, and she said yes. You testified that you got to Charlie's house and his parents had just left. He was nervous, and you both took Xanax and you went to bed. Yes. You're telling the jury you met Charlie and started dating, not exclusive, and at some point he says he wants someone to be harmed and asks you if you knew somebody who could do it. So you contact the father of your kids and you're in a rocky relationship, but you engage him to impose harm on Dan. She's asked you know who Rivera is, but you didn't know he was going to be involved, and Katie said no. And she also didn't know Sigfredo would be the one to actually do it. She said she did not tell Sigfredo the amount of money he would get. She agreed because she needed money, but she said she didn't know how much she would be paid. On the July trip, they ultimately follow and track Dan down, and Sigfredo gets out of the car and shoots and kills him in the garage. So they come back to South Florida. She recounts, Katie goes to Charlie's, they take the Xanax and go to sleep. But the next morning, you still didn't know how much money you were getting. Katie said she thought maybe it was on the paper, and the defense tells her not to speculate, but you arranged a homicide and you did not know the pay, and Katie says that's correct. You get up to leave, you go to Sigfredo, and he hops in your car and you say, I got the money. He goes into your trunk and gets the bag of money. Now, the defense at this point gets really confused about Charlie putting the paper in the diaper bag versus the money that was in Katie's trunk. And they're trying to sort of pin her thinking that maybe she's lying or she's been caught in something when really the defense was confused. A day or two later, Sigfredo gives you your share. And you still didn't know Rivera was involved? No. You said he puts the money into your closet and you go into your closet to get it. Katie wasn't sure if she went in her closet that day, but a couple of days later is when she felt the damp money. She said she did not touch the money when Charlie gave it to her, and then after that, Sigfredo got it. The defense asks, at some point you open the bag and you find stacks of stapled money. How much did you get for arranging Dan to be killed at Charlie's request? Katie says she never counted the money, and the defense fights back, but Katie is insistent she never counted the money. She says she spent some, she deposited some, and she also admits that Charlie gave her checks from the Adelson Institute. The defense brings up, you met Donna once, and she greeted you at the dental practice? Yes. And after that date, Charlie gave you other benefits, and you weren't even together anymore. Katie says they were still friendly, but besides the one time you had that dental appointment and met Donna, after that you never talked to her again, and Katie doesn't think so. The defense says no calls, no texts, nothing. But you're talking to Charlie and Sigfredo, and Donna isn't involved, is she? And Katie says no. Prosecutor Kappelman right here giving a master class with one question to close it all up. Donna didn't have any conversations with you, but Donna had conversations with Charlie. Charlie had conversations with you. Charlie was the go-between for you and Donna, like you were with Charlie and Sigfredo. Is that correct? Yes. No further questions. And by the way, she was not released from her subpoena, so she potentially could be recalled. All right, we will see you later. Well, I will wrap up the financial testimony that was given today about the money and all the accounts. And currently, Sergeant Corbett is on the stand, and it looks like he is doing some cell phone data for the jury. So we will see what that's all about. But for now, that's it. Have a good one. What you know, alibis, welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. It's Friday, August 22nd. We have had openings and the first few witnesses in Donna Adelson's trial. And since today's episode is going to be a bit longer, I usually will break up the opening statements in a recap episode. And then later this evening, we will recap all the testimony. So let's jump right in. For the state, that was Prosecutor Dugan. She points out Donna, and then she shows a photo of Donna from 2014 and says this is what she looked like when this happened. In other words, they have her dressed kind of like a librarian. It's a common defense tactic to make her look less intimidating. She goes on to say she was part of a conspiracy to hire a hitman to kill her former son-in-law, Dan Markel. Her family had a big problem. That was Dan. The solution was her son Charlie had a girlfriend with connections to the type of people willing and capable of killing a complete stranger. Dan was a loving father of 2 boys and a highly respected law professor. She goes through Dan's last morning. Woke up, he took his sons to preschool, he went to the gym, he returned home, drove into his garage, and little did he know that during his morning routine, he was being followed by the 2 hitmen who had traveled from Miami to Tallahassee with the sole purpose to take his life. The killers pulled in behind him, shot him, and a neighbor heard it. The neighbor saw the Prius speed away. The neighbor waited to see if Dan backed out of his garage, and when he didn't, he went over to see if anything was wrong, and he found a gruesome scene. Dan was unresponsive. He was moaning and terribly injured. He was shot in the head. He survived for 14 hours. His boys were 3 and 4, and Dan was only 41. They go through the investigation of trying to figure out who shot Dan, because the crime scene left no trace of the killers. So investigators go down 2 paths. One, they try to track down the Prius that was seen fleeing the scene, and the other was who was inside that Prius. The other path they looked at is motive. Who hated him enough? And after years of tireless investigations, both paths led to Donna Adelson. For the motive, they learned there was a nasty divorce between Dan and Wendy. There was the issue of relocation to Miami. They show messages from Donna to Wendy up on the screen. Part of that are from the emails that we read on the crash course, by the way. And the state says Dan wanted his kids there with him. Wendy's emails showed Donna hated Dan, and she was the relentless driving force behind the relocation to Miami. Donna's participation in her kids' lives went beyond meddling. She was extremely controlling. She was controlling of Wendy's careers, her relationships, and her job. She enlisted Charlie to go to Wendy to persuade her until she agreed to do what Donna wanted her to do. The email showed Donna was desperate to find a way for Wendy and the boys to relocate to Miami. She told Wendy she deserved more than teaching in Tallahassee and that Dan was holding her hostage there. Donna was invested in the relocation. She was making drafts, suggesting arguments Wendy and her attorney should bring up in court. She complained about the financial burden on herself of Wendy living in Tallahassee so they could come visit. She told Wendy relocation was the most important priority in the divorce. It was her non-negotiable. In June of 2013, the judge ruled in Dan's favor, denying relocation and dismissed that in a way that Wendy could not request to relocate again. After relocation was denied, Donna told Wendy in emails that Dan has not beaten the Adelson family yet. She suggested paying for the boys' education, plane tickets for Dan, and a $1 million bribe to Dan to let Wendy move. And if those bribes didn't work, Donna suggested ways to bully Dan into submission. She set out a plan of action to make Dan miserable. She knew Dan was devoutly Jewish and suggested Wendy pose the boys in front of a Catholic church, post it on social media, and let Dan know she was having them baptized. Donna told Wendy she had to put on the acting performance of her life. It didn't matter to Donna if Wendy dressed the boys in Nazi uniforms to get them back to Miami. She told Wendy that the rest of her life, Charlie's and Harvey's, depended on Wendy and the boys being able to relocate back to Miami. And Donna's closest confidant was Charlie. She constantly vented to him about the relocation. Donna portrayed Dan as a crazy person who was causing extreme amounts of stress to her and Harvey. She made this problem Charlie's problem to solve. After the divorce was finalized, each side filed many more motions, and this continued up until his death. Dan alleged Donna was disparaging him to his kids. She was trying to alienate them from their dad. He was trying to take them away from her. He asked the court that Donna have supervised contact, and this was pending in court at the time of his death. 48 hours after Dan was killed, Wendy and the boys relocated to Miami, where they moved in with Donna and Harvey, and the boys started school. Their problem was solved. The Adelson family was very tight-knit. Charlie, Harvey, and Donna all worked together at their dental practice. Donna managed their accounts at the office, but she managed more. She was the matriarch, and she was domineering. She ran the office, the homes, and the lives of the family members. After Dan was killed, law enforcement interviewed Wendy, and she said she was at home having her TV fixed at the time of Dan's murder. Law enforcement asked who would have a motive, and when Wendy was being interviewed by police, she acknowledged her family did, that her parents had more reason to dislike Dan than anyone else. Wendy called her parents from the interview room to tell them Dan had been shot. But when she got off the phone, Wendy said they acted surprised, and that was a relief. When asked if anyone would want to kill Dan on her behalf, Wendy said Charlie had joked that he had looked into hiring a hitman to kill Dan to celebrate her divorce, but instead he bought her a TV. That TV was Wendy's alibi the morning of the murder. The repair appointment was set up by her parents, and the motive leads to the Adelsons, including Donna, who vowed getting them to Miami. And if Charlie was just joking, it stopped being funny when Dan was actually killed by a hitman. Law enforcement is following the second path of tracking down the Prius, and they found surveillance of the Prius following Dan into the parking lot of the gym, waiting for an hour, and then following home. They gathered some past information and phone records, which led them to the car. But who was in the car and why did they kill Dan? They did a painstaking review of surveillance to find this car, and it took a long time. But they found the needle in the haystack. They found the numbers that communicated with the cell tower at the gym. It had a Miami area code, and that number belonged to Sigfredo Garcia. Sigfredo had communicated with Rivera, his longtime friend. Phone records show the phones left Miami July 16th, and on the day of the murder, they turned their phones off just before the murder, and those phones stayed off until they were around Gainesville, Florida. Once back in Miami, ATM surveillance caught them in the Prius, but they kept looking for the why. Who or what is the connection? Donna, in her emails, demonstrated ample motive. Sigfredo's frequent contact was Katie, who he had a long on-again, off-again relationship with, and they shared 2 children. And the 2 paths of the car and motive converge when they see Katie is one of the most frequent contacts in Charlie Adelson's phone, the one Donna nagged to death about Wendy being in Tallahassee. Katie was dating Charlie. Charlie was looking to hire a hitman. When Dan's killed, who was the hitman? Someone with a close relationship to Charlie's girlfriend. Those paths charted the way to Donna. They followed the money and it pointed to Donna. They reviewed bank records and more of all the suspects. They saw Rivera and Garcia bought cars and motorcycles. Katie got a boob job and later got a Lexus sedan that was owned by Harvey. Katie's bank account showed no check written for the car or the boob job. Her account had a huge spike in cash deposits. She deposited more money in the 5 weeks after the murder than the entire year before, with no record of her being employed. 2 months after the murder, Donna added Katie to payroll and started issuing her checks every 2 weeks despite the fact Katie didn't work there. Each of the 44 checks written to Katie were signed by Donna. Law enforcement wanted to know what the suspects were saying. And in the phone records, law enforcement noticed a pattern of communication surrounding important events in the case. The calls went from Donna to Charlie, then Charlie to Katie, and then Katie to Sigfredo, and then back the other way, in the same order. Donna never talked to Katie or the shooter or vice versa. Charlie never called the shooter. If this is a conspiracy murder for hire, could it be Charlie and Donna are insulating themselves from the shooters, having Katie act as a middleman? Law enforcement set up the bump to see how information was traveling in the conspiracy, and they got a warrant to listen in real time to their conversations. It was April 2016. It took 2 years to find out who was in the car and so on. At this point, Charlie and Katie are no longer dating. They had broken up over a year ago, and Katie is back with Sigfredo. Charlie had many other girlfriends since Katie, but Charlie and Katie remain close friends and still in regular contact. At this point, Rivera was in prison for an unrelated charge, and Donna is happily taking care of her grandkids at this time, thinking they got away with murder. They had no reason to think they were being listened to. Law enforcement decided to send an undercover agent posing as someone on behalf of Rivera to walk up to Donna on the street and try to blackmail her for money. This undercover agent hands her an article about Dan's murder. Written on there is a phone number and the amount of $5,000. The agent tells Donna he knows they're taking care of Katie and Sigfredo and want money for Rivera to even it out. He never says Charlie's name to Donna. She puts the paper in her purse without looking at it. She knew exactly what it was about. Law enforcement listens in. Did she go to the police to report the blackmail or something else? She calls Charlie, despite the blackmailer never mentioning Charlie to her. On that call, you would think she would be surprised. Nope. She never says Dan's name at all. She says she needs to talk to Charlie in person about some paperwork just delivered to her, and it involves the 2 of us, and he should know what she's talking about. They keep talking, and Donna says he should bring cash to their meeting and says the TV is probably about 5, meaning $5,000. She tells Charlie the man who approached her mentioned an ex-girlfriend. Donna never asks which ex. Charlie never asked which girlfriend, and he's had a lot, but he didn't need to. He knew the TV is probably 5 meant she was being blackmailed about Danny's murder. where the TV was the alibi and the ex in question was the one he solicited a hitman from. After this call, Charlie called Katie. He doesn't call his most recent girlfriend or the one before that. That's the only ex he calls after getting that information from Donna. Neither Charlie or Donna reported this attempted blackmail to the police, and you'll hear the calls. Notice they're being cautious about what they say. They're suspicious law enforcement could be behind the bump and maybe are listening. After calling Katie, Charlie meets up with Donna, and she gives him the paperwork and makes it Charlie's newest problem to solve. He goes to Katie. They meet at a restaurant, Dolce Vita, but the FBI is nearby with a camera recording the conversation. We hear Charlie discussing if the man could be undercover or he could be someone trying to blackmail them. And if it's a blackmailer, is it someone trying to make a quick buck or someone with inside information of Donna's role in the murder? Charlie reassures Katie if it is the police, that's a good thing. They don't have enough evidence to charge anyone. And Charlie said if they had any evidence, we would have already gone to the airport. At this point, there had been no arrests, and all police had revealed publicly was the Prius. Charlie starts giving Katie analogies about rental cars being used in crime, saying they can't prove the crime just because DNA is in the car. You have to put the person at the scene. And even if they identified who rented the car, they still wouldn't have enough to hold that person. He said also you need someone to witness the crime, a suspect to admit it, or the suspect to admit it on a wire call. He tells Katie, if this is the guy who knows information, there are two ways to deal with it. You can call the police, but he could start talking. And the other way is to pay the blackmailer, but let him know it's a one-time thing and scare him off, threatening to go to police if he comes back. Charlie tells her to call the blackmailer and say the Adelsons have no idea what you're talking about. I'll give you this money as charity and not go to the police. But he says he's concerned
that's
the
how
guy will
you
go away
usually
and
handle
would keep coming back for
blackmailers.
more money. Then Charlie says the best solution would be to have the blackmailer killed. Katie asks Charlie to help her, and Charlie says she's taken care of and reminds Katie she's on payroll at the dental practice. They hug and part ways, and Charlie immediately calls Donna to let her know everything's fine and he's handled it. They use code words. Katie calls Sigfredo using code words and tasks him to call the blackmailer. Later on, Sigfredo and Rivera are arrested and charged. Rivera cut a deal and told police the truth, that he was hired by Sigfredo, who told him this was a job Katie got for them in Tallahassee and it paid $100,000, and that Rivera would get a third. Sigfredo had a photo of Dan and handwritten notes on that paper. The first call Sigfredo made after the murder was to Katie, and she reassured him they would get the money the next day, which they did. Katie brought it to Rivera's home, and cell phone records verified Rivera's information. But the money was packaged in an unusual way, in stacks of 1,000 that were stapled together. The Adelsons had a lot of access to cash from cash discounts given at the practice. They kept it in a stack and in a safe, and friends say Charlie stapled money with stacks of $1,000. After the three arrests, law enforcement did not stop. 3 years after Sigfredo's arrest and conviction, they kept interviewing people. They wanted to clarify the recordings that couldn't be clearly heard initially. And in March of 2022, Charlie is indicted. 2 months later, Katie was convicted. During Katie's trial, she took the stand and insisted she had no knowledge of the murder. The Adelsons must have went around her, and she was the victim of a setup. After her conviction, she testified she was the connection between the Adelsons and the killers. And at Charlie's trial, Charlie wanted someone to hire to kill his sister's ex because his mom was stressed out about the issues with Dan. A picture was painted that Dan was so terrible Donna couldn't eat or sleep. And the night of the murder, Katie went to Charlie's to pick up the money. Charlie said his parents had just been there and left the money. They were able to show Donna was there in a text where she said, "outside your house." Katie spent the night with Charlie, and he put the money in the trunk of her car. But the money stood out. It was stapled, and it was damp. She delivered the money to Rivera. Charlie told Katie that Donna washed the money so it couldn't be traced, and they laughed about that. Charlie took the stand at his trial and said that Katie, Sigfredo, and Rivera were involved, but not his family. He said they went to Tallahassee to kill Dan, and they colluded with Katie to extort the Adelsons. But Charlie's interpretation of the facts was not reasonable to believe, and he was convicted in November of 2023. And within hours of his guilty verdict, Donna planned to flee to Vietnam, where she could not be extradited from. She researched non-extradition countries and applied for an emergency visa to Vietnam. She put money aside for trust funds for her grandkids, and they booked a one-way ticket. Days later, she was arrested at the airport and charged for her role in the murder of Dan. After Donna was charged, law enforcement received information from a woman, a fellow inmate, who said Donna was offering them bribes in exchange for false testimony in this trial. She promised them money, housing, veneers, prescriptions if they testified a different way. Donna even scripted a question and answer for her to memorize. They do show that on screen, by the way. Dugan finishes up saying that Donna conspired with Charlie, who got Katie to get the hitmen, and then Donna paid her with cash and checks. Donna acted in furtherance of the murder plot beyond thinking about it, and that makes her guilty of first-degree murder as if she pulled the trigger. This came at a high price. She took the life of a loving father and gave lifelong grief to his loved ones. And that was it for the state's openings. Let's go through the defense. You just sat through a pretty cool presentation, and for an hour, you heard about this killing and a lot of why they think Donna had motive to kill Danny Markel, and a lot about what others did in this case, but no evidence to show Donna planned this, nor hired anyone to do this or intend for this to happen. She asked that they not stop thinking about why we're here. It's not just that Donna is on trial, but two men killed Danny. And don't forget Danny. He was an amazing professor. He had 2 degrees from Harvard, and he was very well respected by his peers. She says, I wish I had met him. More important to Danny were his little boys. They were 3 and 4 when this happened. When Wendy moved out in 2012, he didn't want the divorce, and they squabbled back and forth. Divorce isn't usually fun or friendly, and a lot of things were said. Moving to 2014 when Danny was killed. The divorce had been over with for a year, and the relocation issue had ended. She couldn't raise that issue again. Danny advocated for himself and his children. He wanted as much time as he could get with them, so they split time equally. When he didn't have the kids, he would visit them at their preschool.
Yes, it's like pastels or something like that.
When it wasn't his time, it was hard to wrangle the boys. But when Donna had the kids, it would be after dinner and baths, and the kids would be settled, and Danny would read bedtime stories to his boys. He made sure they didn't forget him.
Oh, I've been sweating nonstop for like 8 hours.
They're teenagers now. They lost the opportunity to grow up with their father because someone took him from them. She said ugly, foul things during the divorce, and you'll learn why and how. She was interacting with Danny. Danny is a normal person just like all of us. Donna was 64 years old when this happened. She was married to Harvey now for 54 years. She got up that morning and went to work at the business owned by her son. She did the books, she got the charts out, she greeted the patients, and she worked into the evening. People who know Donna will tell you she isn't who the state is portraying her to be. She's kind, caring, loving, and cares more about people than herself. On the day of the murder, Sigfredo and Rivera followed Danny from his house to preschool, watched him there.
All right, I'm gonna go to bed. I gotta go to work
gym,
in the morning.
Waited outside, followed him back to his house, and pulled in the driveway. Danny is talking on the cell phone to someone and notices someone is coming into his driveway and mentions to the person he's talking to, he needs to see who this is. He turns, and Sigfredo is holding a revolver.
We're doing the application now. It just takes a long time.
Danny puts his hands up.
So we're gonna rent a house in the
This man is
meantime.
pointing a gun at him. In that instant, I can't fathom how terrified he must have been
I'll see you guys
when he
later.
was shot.